What's up, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Celtics Talk Podcast here on the NBC Sports Boston Podcast Network. And yes, got some fancy digs back inside the studio. We just got done post up. Me and Amina Smith here. And Amina, celebrating your 1-year anniversary here in Boston.
Oh my God.
Time flies.
Time flies when you're having fun.
For sure. Have you had fun with this team?
Oh, I've definitely had fun. I've been on the roller coaster. Really.
I was going to say, did you forget the first 9 months you were here?
Look, I think back to like the first time I was on the podcast and what was happening. The Celtics were on this roller coaster, and I'm just like, okay, I think this is a good team. Maybe not a good team. They're winning, now they're losing, and now Forsberg. They're tied for second in the East.
Yeah.
This is a good time to be here in Boston.
I was going to say, like, everyone who was like, I don't want to be on your podcast right now because the team was horrible and we had nothing but bad things to say, is now like, hey, we're going to talk about the Celtics. So,
of course.
Give me what have you learned? What's the biggest takeaway so far from your 1 year in Boston? Outside the team, like you said, we heard when Brad Stevens signed an extension a couple years ago, he said, I feel like a masshole now.
Oh.
Have you embraced our fine city and the crazy ways of the Northeast?
I would say the one thing that I have learned being here in Boston is that people don't know how to merge. I think that is the number one thing. I was literally on Instagram or Twitter, this is about a week ago, and I really came to my senses and I was like, wait a minute. I was like, I feel like I'm also driving in Florida because they can drive in Florida as well. And I'm like, oh my gosh, people never merge, or they're also merging into your lane here in Boston as well.
Well, no, I mean, so like I would say you have to be aggressive. You have to be like,
oh, don't worry. I'm from New York. I'm definitely an aggressive driver. I will tell you that. Right. I go from 0 to 100 very quickly on the road.
Just put your foot on that gas and then you're in your lane.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I'd say that's the one thing that I have noticed being here is that I may not have turned into a mass hole just yet, but I'm noticing that the driving is definitely different than anywhere else that I've been.
Well, have you seen your first rotary yet? Did you have rotaries back in New York? Or
no. Oh, you mean the roundabouts?
Oh,
yeah. I've been about 10 roundabouts, I feel like, going around Boston.
I'm going to take you out to Worcester. We have them like on every street corner.
They drive me crazy.
There's this thing called Kelly Square, which was essentially a double rotary.
Oh, no.
And it's pure chaos. And it's where I learned to drive. So you just, you learn about merging. You just put your foot down. And speaking of merging, the Celtics have learned how to merge because Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown going to the basket, finishing strong. I mean, we sat here in this very studio back on January 6th. I was pretty much laid out on top of the desk because I just couldn't fathom any longer how to put this team into words. They were 3 games under 500. They were in 11th place in the Eastern Conference. If you had told me in that moment that we would be recording a podcast 2.5 months later and that the Celtics would be tied for second in the Eastern Conference and 17 games above 500, I would have called you crazy.
Oh, absolutely.
I would have wondered what magical pills you had to make you think that. What has it been like watching this turnaround? And I mean, will it ever not feel ridiculously weird?
No, it will never not feel weird because I remember back in January where you were falling out all over the desk and we were trying to figure out, okay, what is wrong with this team? Why can't they get it together? And to see the turnaround that they've had is just completely amazing because we talked about getting reeled back in throughout the season where they do well, but then they lose a couple games, or they do well and then they lose to a team that's at the bottom of the East or the West. And now it's like, okay, they're beating good teams. They're beating the Bucks. They're beating the Suns. They're passing all of these tests. Coming back from this trip out west where they go 4-0. You know, now at this point, it's like, okay, I have to buy into this team because at one point I was like, okay, like they're doing great for the regular season. What are they going to look like in the postseason? And now it looks like, okay, they might have the strength to go toe-to-toe with a Miami Heat, with the Cleveland Cavaliers, with a Brooklyn for a 7-game series. If you would have asked me that back in January, I would have told you were absolutely crazy. I was like 1, 2, 3 Cancun. I don't know what we're going to do with this team. But really looking at them right now, this is a team that I think can go to the Eastern Conference Finals. I mean,
again, if you had said that on January 6th, you would have looked tremendously smart. You know, the hard part for me was thinking, all right, they're in this rut. It doesn't look great. They don't look mentally tough enough to be a great team. And then everything changed, like legitimately everything. Everything we've been asking for with this team flipped, and whether that was Jayson Tatum going up another level. Maybe we should have seen that part coming, right? It's like the second half of the season, all of a sudden it's, hey, I'm Superman. You know, we got Grant Williams, Batman. We'll talk about that. But Jayson Tatum just rips off the shirt, and there's the S, and it's time to be all NBA caliber player. And then, like, can the Jays both have good nights on the same night? Perk was sitting here screaming about it to the point where I don't even know if, like, Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown will talk to him anymore.
Right.
But
he was actually Perk was asking for
He said,
yeah, tell him I love him. If you talk to him, tell Jayson Tatum that I love him. I love that part of the broadcast last night.
If they want to hold grudges, I don't mind it because if whatever motivates you when you're out there. But so you have that, and all of a sudden Jaylen and Jayson going for 30. Every night it feels like lately they're both going for 30 or 25 plus and just dominating games. The bench, which was just an absolute mess and unable to sustain even when the starters did play well, they've transformed. I love talking to them because you've seen our programming. You did BST for all those days. We don't do credit pie around here. We do blame pie. We're like, who should we blame for this? And it was like, Ime can't coach, and Brad got the wrong roster, and the Jays aren't ready to be leaders, and all that's gone. So I'm tearing up the blame pie. But credit pie, who deserves the biggest slice of credit pie for this?
Ooh. I don't know if it's like one person that deserves most of the credit or just most of it. I would say it would be between Ime for staying the course, right? Because he's leading the ship, but then also Jayson Tatum as well, because I feel like it's 1A, 1B, because you got to have your all-star player that's buying in, because then if he buys in, then the rest of the team buys in. But then Ime Udoka for not listening to the outside noise of us who were going absolutely crazy at the beginning of the season and wondering, okay, is it going to work? Is he the right coach? You know, are they really buying in, or is he being too much of a player's coach to, you know, the guys that are in the locker room? Are they really respecting him as a leader of this team? I think when I look at the turnaround that they've had, you've got to look at Ime Udoka and what he's done, especially in his first season here in Boston. A tough fan base to deal with and the high expectations. You got to take your hat off to him.
Is he coach of the year?
I think if we're talking regular season,
because it is a
regular season award. I would say
Yeah, all right.
I would say you have to. When you look at where they were back in January, no one thought that this team would be where they are right now. And even I pat myself on the back right now for the preseason prediction of me saying that they were going to be fourth in the East, and now I look like a genius because they're tied for two.
You actually underrated them.
I'm like they're tied for two, so I look like a genius. But when you take a look at the turnaround that's happened with this team and what he's gotten them to buy into, to really tap into another level out there on the court, you see, you know, with the assists, we talk about that all the time, the ball movement, the basketball IQ, how it's raising for players like Rob Williams, for Grant Williams, for Peyton Pritchard, who's being ready when his opportunity comes up. You know, that's coaching. And I think that's all coming through in what we're seeing and how the team is performing. So when you talk about Coach of the Year, Ime Udoka, he's got to be in the conversation.
So I think if the Celtics finish 1-2 in the East, maybe even third, maybe even fourth, I think Ime gets the award. Now, the person that's standing in his way most is probably Eric Spoelstra, who has got this Heat team, and like they added Kyle Lowry, but they haven't had all their pieces, and yet they've just sort of been the front runners of the Eastern Conference from pretty much start to finish here, and have really dominated. While everyone else has had their little things. Like Milwaukee's definitely not going all out the year after a championship, and Brooklyn's had their issues. So I'm curious to see how voters will go, but it's usually the story that wins too. So if I'm a voter, I'm thinking, man, I've had the Celtics dead and buried. Some of us might have been saying they might have to think about the lottery. And now all of a sudden you're at one of the top 2 seeds in the Eastern Conference. I think you do have to give them great consideration. I mean, the hardest part for me was he comes in after Brad Stevens, and there's already like a high level to understand. And like Brad had his own issues getting all these guys to pull the same way at the end of his tenure, and he couldn't get the right mix and all that. But Ime comes in and has to try to figure that out on the fly, on his first head coaching, all while the wheels are coming off at the start of the year, to keep this team together, to have them buy into that vision is remarkable. And you mentioned it, like from the Jays and the way they want to play, the assist percentage spiking through the roof in January and now through March, the defense just like out of the gates.
Otherworldly.
At the start of the year, we're like, how are they this bad?
It's literally, I feel like the defense has taken on the personality of Marcus Smart. And I think, of course, I feel like it does start with Marcus Smart just because of the intensity that he plays with out there on the floor, and also being a veteran in that locker room. I mean, if you see, Rob Williams has said it as well. He's like, Marcus Smart is the blueprint. He's the guy where, like, I'm looking at, I get my energy from seeing him performing out there on the court. But you take a look at that defense, it is just otherworldly when you put it up against, these other teams around the NBA in the East or the West. So you take a look at that, and it's just, I can't believe, honestly, like what they're doing at this point in the season.
And that's why they have a chance. I keep telling you, like, I'm a little bit worried about the offense. It goes through some lulls. They for the totality of the season, they haven't been crisp enough to be a championship-level team. But then I say that, in the last 10 weeks, it's just been on this steady incline. And that's why when I'm giving my credit pie, I fall back heavily to Jayson Tatum because it's so weird to say, because at game 41, if you'd asked me, what kind of season has Jayson Tatum had? I would have probably said, he's not shooting the ball well, but he is doing Jayson Tatum things. But ultimately it comes down to, when you're the leader of the team, is how many wins are you leading your team to? So it was fair to be critical that Tatum and Brown were not doing enough to get their team to the finish line, even if the numbers with the starters were great. It just individually, Jayson wasn't having a great year. And again, maybe we should have seen it coming, because every time he gets to game 45, it's like, boom, hits that shifter.
Yeah.
And he takes off, and he dropped 50 in Washington on January 23rd, the same day that Marcus Smart came back from COVID. And just like this confluence of events, everything, they're healthy, and all of a sudden, and this team just absolutely, they'd already been sort of starting to go up, and then like Grant Williams' mother at the NASA space station hitting the button.
Hitting the button.
Straight up, they go. And it's been amazing to watch. And the crazy thing to me is Jayson Tatum has evolved so much this season. The playmaking, the finishing at the rim, all these little things that we sat here and slammed our head against the desk and said, when is he going to do this? He's done it.
Right.
So, like, where's Jayson Tatum in the hierarchy now? Are we talking MVP caliber? Are we talking like...
Definitely in the MVP conversation, but I would say right now he's got to be at least creeping into that top 5 in the NBA, just because of what we're seeing night in and night out. Now, I wish that, it didn't take until the middle or towards the end of the season for us to see it, but it is a long season, though. So, you take a look at what Jayson Tatum is doing, and he's really etching his name as, a headliner in the NBA, and we're seeing it week in and week out. Eastern Conference Player of the Week this week. And
3 times!
3 times! And then you know what? Also, I thought about this yesterday when Kevin Durant over the summer during the Olympics talked about Jayson Tatum. He's like, he's going to be leading scoring and, at the Olympics at some point. When you get praise like that from Kevin Durant, not once, but like 2-3 times, that's got to say something about what you're doing out there on the court. And I respect that usually when you have one of the greatest players in the world right now in Kevin Durant, where he has basketball eyes and he can see, he sees things that we don't see.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
He sees things that we don't see. And so when I take a look at, Kevin Durant giving that type of praise to Jayson Tatum, I knew in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, maybe it might not happen now. Maybe it might not happen next year. But Jayson Tatum is going to be one of the best players we see in the NBA during our era.
I think there is something to the fact that it feels like every year Tatum goes to the All-Star game, and whether it's just being around those guys or just kind of feeling yourself. Like when you go to that event and you're one of the guys now and you've done it 3 straight years, there's just a different swagger.
Oh, yeah.
And we see when he walks into the arena now, he's got the shades,
oh,
he's got
yeah.
the sweatshirt.
Shout out to his stylist, because he keeps him on point.
I mean,
he keeps him on point.
He's got all that, and now it's just a different level of confidence on the floor. Again, I think his basketball IQ has always been there, but his ability to read defenses, to make the right play out of the double. And now it all works together, right? Like, the bench has to make those shots to make it look good when Jayson Tatum passes out of a double. And there were times when the bench wasn't making shots. But it's just all really come together. Now I sit here and I'm like, man, all NBA voters are going to have to start considering him for the first team. Now the problem's going to be, will Jokic and Embiid be listed as centers, and will they end up on 2 different teams? Will there be an extra forward spot, or will one of those get clogged up? But isn't it crazy that we're sitting here and we're like, after all of his struggles at the start of the year, Jayson Tatum might be all NBA first team based on the way he's playing right now.
It's crazy, but it's not crazy at all, because I feel like Perk brought it up last night during the broadcast, talking about Jayson Tatum being a student of the game. And anytime you're a student of the game in really any area or whatever you study or whatever you do, you're going to be great. You're going to be one of the greatest. And Jayson Tatum, I feel like because he lives, eats, sleeps basketball, and he's around those superstars around the league, I'm not surprised that he's on the trajectory of what we're talking about, where he's going to be one of the best in the NBA. Again, I go back to that conversation that Kevin Durant, had about Jayson Tatum and all the praise that he had for him. When you have a star like that in the league, that headlines the league all over the world, talking about you on national TV, on international TV.
Imagine the amount of people watching the Olympics.
Exactly, all over the world. I think that speaks volumes about where you're headed in your career. And again, Jayson Tatum being a student of the game, there's no question that he's going to be at the top of the NBA sooner rather than later.
All right. Well, now we have to shift our attention to the main focus of the week, which is Grant Williams dubbing himself Batman.
I
feel bad.
It.
Every time I talk about Jayson Tatum, I feel bad because I feel like we should spend a segment on Jaylen Brown, who has just figured it out and is scoring at an incredible rate and really carving out his own niche. But Grant hijacked the week, in part because he sent Jaylen Brown out to do his business and had him say that he would like to be referred to as Batman. We talked about this on Tuesday night. Celtics post up. Is it okay for Grant Williams to name himself Batman? You know how I feel. I'm going to hold it in for a minute.
Yeah.
How do you feel about Grant Williams dubbing himself?
Look, Grant Williams is out there playing some of the best basketball of his career. I don't care what he wants to be called, Batman, Spider-Man, Ant-Man. He can call himself whatever he wants to be called, but if he keeps performing the way he does out there on the court, I'm not going to complain about it. And also, Forsberg, what I love, this team is having fun. And it's making our jobs fun because they're having fun, because you know what it was like back in December, January. It was not fun.
Yeah.
So if you want to call yourself Batman, I'm totally here for it. I kind of like Dark Knight better. I'm not going to lie. I wish it was more so like a little bit cooler, like, like Grant Williams, The Dark Knight. But Batman, I'll take it. I know that, on social media, people were saying, oh, because he shut down the Joker. And then you had Grant Williams say, oh, no, my dad called me Batman last year. I don't know if I'm buying that story.
Not buying it at all.
But I'm like, hey, lean into the fact that you locked the Joker down. If that's what you wanted to do and that's how you wanted to name yourself because of that, lean into it. If you're going to have the confidence, just step into that confidence fully.
Well, first off, if you're going to have fun in those press conferences, Celtics, get in the shower a little bit quicker, because post-game and post-game plus is only on for a little bit. I mean, I feel like we're on the air for a good amount of time after the game, and every night we go back to our desk, and that's when they come out for the post-game.
Oh, yeah, I look up, it's midnight.
And we're kicking ourselves. We're going, why wouldn't they come out a little bit quicker, especially when Grant Williams is clutching his phone and an iPhone Note that has every Celtics player.
I just want to know when he found the
superhero.
time to do that. Like that took time, attention, and detail for us.
If Ime Udoka is sitting there, I'd probably wander over and go, Grant, this is really great. This is a diligent list. I'm glad you included everybody. Next time, spend some time on the scouting report. Be ready for the personnel that's going to be on the floor. And to Grant's credit, he went out and put up a 20 and 10. Here's my whole rant about nicknames and Grant Williams. You can't pick your own nickname. Like, this is the number one and maybe the only rule when it comes to nicknames. Now, he's tried to come up with this backstory where he says, oh, my dad, a year ago, way back in the day, all my buddies were calling. No, that's not how it works. He wanted, after a night where he shut down Jokic and swatted the Joker on the baseline, he sent out Jaylen Brown to do his business. And Jaylen goes out there and is a good soldier and says, Grant's in the locker room, wants to be called Batman. And, of course, it's all hilarious, and social media blows up. But the best part, by far, though, is Jayson Tatum.
Jayson Tatum looked like, it was the reaction on his face for me. It was the shake. He said, ugh. At that part, I completely lost it after the game watching that, because I was like you could see that they're just having so much fun. I mean, it's just, you could obviously tell that Grant Williams and Jayson Tatum have a great relationship, but the reaction that Jayson Tatum had to the nickname, priceless. I loved it.
It was clear that no one had explained to Tatum in that moment that having just defeated the Joker, that was the sort of offshoot for why Grant wanted to be called Batman. But just watching the wheels turn and Tatum trying to figure it out in the moment was great. And then ending it by going, yeah, Grant played good, but I'm going to call him Grant. It was the perfect, deadpan moment. Of course, it takes off the day later in Oklahoma City here, where Grant goes out and has the big game and then comes out with a list. I agree. I think I'd be more inclined to lean into it if it had been something that played off of Grant himself. Grant is trying to make the case that, much like Bruce Wayne, he would fly below the radar and wasn't the most skilled. And
honestly, I think that's a good connection.
Anyone look at Grant Williams and think Bruce Wayne?
I think it's a good connection. I'm not mad at it at all. I mean, I know the rule that you can't get. I'm trying to think if I've ever given myself a nickname. I don't think I've ever done that. I've gotten only nicknames from my mom and my friends.
What would if you could pick a nickname for yourself?
If I could pick a nickname? Oh man, I don't know. I'm not good at giving nicknames.
I wish
people call me Mimi.
I should have prepared something.
Yeah, like Mimi or like Mina. My mom calls me Mookie, Chicken. My mom has so many weird nicknames for me. It's the most random thing. And my mom, because she calls me Chicken, the ringtone is actually an actual chicken. It's the funniest thing ever, but it's also my mom. Love you, Mom.
You gotta explain it to when people, when it goes off in public, it's just my.
It's my daughter. Don't worry about it. It's my oldest daughter. It's okay.
Nice. So if he had gone with Ant-Man.
Okay.
And we're playing off Grant, right? Grant-Man.
Grant.
Okay, I'm with that. Someone on social media, I wish I could give the right person credit here, came up with the Dork Knight. And so Grant being a dork and a total nerd, and I say that being, again, the biggest nerd on this network, that I love that. Like, you want to play off Batman by being the Dork Knight and you play your Catan and all that? Perfect. I'm all in. But just labeling yourself Batman and then having the nerve to come out and go, here's a list of all my teammates, but also because we're talking exclusively MCU universe here, I'm also going to be Spider-Man.
That's dedication.
The audacity on this man.
The confidence. I love the confidence.
It's irrational.
I love it.
And I do not understand how you can have that much irrational confidence, but I guess to be an NBA player, that's what you must do.
He had his first career double-double.
Yeah.
He's going to have some confidence. He's shutting down the Joker. That's building up confidence, Chris Forsberg, okay?
Here's the only way I will allow this to continue to stay and to create the silliness. On Wednesday night, when they play the Utah Jazz, if everybody shows up in their approved nickname,
gosh.
If Al Horford walks in as Captain America.
Straight cosplay.
If Al Horford, if Grant walks in with a Batman mask, if he rides up, so Doug Flutie, the former Boston College quarterback, the NFL superstar, he has a Batmobile in his house in Natick.
What?
In Framingham, one of the two.
I had no idea. Oh my God.
If they want to go out there and get a Batmobile,
can we connect him with Grant?
That's what I'm saying. Like have
Instagram
Grant roll up to a game.
I love this.
Then like now we're connecting some dots. Now I'm kind of buying in a little bit more. Now he's leaning in fully to this and not just dubbing himself a great superhero nickname. Then I think I'm on board. But for right now, I'm just a little bit hesitant to lean in. But you mentioned it. The reason why I do embrace the general nature of it is because the vibes right now are fantastic.
Oh yeah, it's so good.
And you can tell whether it's Malik Fitz doing his little New York City dances on the sideline, air guitars. Like I am enjoying that Celtics basketball is fun again. And part of the reason it's fun is because Jayson Tatum's making the right play. The Celtics are moving the ball. Jaylen Brown is dunking on everyone. Like, it's fun for all the right reasons and not just because they're winning games, although ultimately winning is the key to it all. All right, Celtics coming back home. Schedule gets a little bit tougher. How are you feeling about the seedings right now? We had a lot of talks with Eddie House while he was in town.
Yeah.
Where should the Celtics get to? There's going to be a lot of juggling going on. Where do you think the Celtics end up? Where should they be wanting to end up, and who should they be wanting to play?
Okay, so I think they end up probably a 3-4 seed. Okay. I would love it if they, either 4 or 5.
You want them to be 4 so that
I want them to be 4 so that I end up being right, at the beginning of the season. But I think they end up a 3-4 seed. I think the matchup, if they get, where are the Cavaliers now? Because I feel like they've lost.
I think they're still 6, but the Raptors are right on their heels.
Ooh, the Eastern Conference is so jumbled up. You don't want to see, obviously, Brooklyn in that first round, but also I feel like I'm not that scared of Brooklyn anymore for some reason. I feel like the way the Celtics are playing right now, if they did, draw a 1 or 2 seed and they had to play Brooklyn, I think they could go toe-to-toe with them. Now, at the end of the day, I'm not going to lie, Kevin Durant's going to do Kevin Durant type things, and so is Kyrie Irving. So I don't know if they're going to make it out of the first round if they play Brooklyn, but I do think, that this team, they're playing well enough where they will be competitive in that series, whereas last season, right, we looked at them playing Brooklyn and it's like, all right, well, this is over. They're not going to make it past this, past that round. But
I like how you hedged that, and just because you knew your phone was going to blow up with your Brooklyn friend.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And being like, wait, I
gotta play it safe. But I think if they play either, the Cavs, even if the Heat drop a little bit, which they might, if they play the Heat, I think that'll be a good series, but yeah, I just don't want to see Brooklyn in that first round, even though I do feel like the Celtics could go toe-to-toe with a team like that.
Yeah. I actually think 4 is the sweet spot, too, because you're probably bringing Chicago into play. They've got their own injury woes right now, Lonzo Ball. There's a chance, they just might not be the juggernaut that they were at times. And I say that juggernaut, their offense can be very good, but they don't play a lot of defense either. But they got Zach LaVine and Vucevic, and there's a chance there where it would be a difficult matchup if everything was clicking. But it's probably the least of the concerns. Them and the Cavs are probably the most advantageous. Right. Even Toronto scares me a little bit, because there are nights where Toronto looks really good.
In a 7-game series, though?
Probably not in a 7-game series. I think the Celtics get through it, but I think Nick Nurse would throw a bunch of junk defenses out there. They'd play a lot of zone, and it would be you'd have to work a lot harder than you think for whatever that would end up being, 2-7, 3-6 kind of matchup. But the reason I like the 4 spot is because, okay, even if you draw Chicago, even if Chicago proves to be a little bit tougher than maybe the Cavs would have been as a young team, you get through that, and then you get the Heat in round 2. And this is no slight on the Heat. I think the Heat are a very good team. They've proven it out. We started this podcast by talking about Spoelstra, and I think that's a difficult matchup, especially for a first-year coach. But there's no Giannis. There's no Durant. My whole thing is avoiding superstars. I want series where Jayson Tatum is the clear-cut best player on the court. And I think in every other team besides, Philadelphia, and you can make a case there, like when Jason's playing to the level he is, and Philadelphia having to figure things out. But, between Embiid, Giannis, and Durant, those are probably the 3 teams I least want to see. So the further you can push those out, and the fewer of those you have to go through, I think the more advantageous for the Celtics. So, but it's going to, okay, so now what happens if things start sliding a little bit, like you said? What if, for whatever reason, Miami goes into a funk at the finish line of the season, slides down to number 2? Well, now do you want to get to 4, you get to 3 so that you can play them? It's all going to be really fun to see how they posture. 3-way tie as we speak with that second seed. Celtics, Philly, and Milwaukee. It could just be crazy here.
It is crazy. It's absolutely.
I mean, it's already crazy.
When I was looking at standings last night, I'm like, wait, we have a 3-way tie for number 2 in the East. What is happening? Complete chaos right now in the Eastern Conference standings.
Like I said, every day I sit here and I try to say, here's what they should do. But it all depends on what happens with everybody else.
Right.
What if Brooklyn catches fire? They probably won't.
And I didn't expect the Bulls to slide the way they did, to be honest.
And that's the other thing. But again, health woes have hurt them. But if they get healthier for the playoffs, if guys start coming back, maybe that matchup, I feel differently about it. Cavaliers, too. Cavaliers have sort of come back to earth a little bit. They were a great story early in the year, but I don't think they're going to have the offensive firepower to be a legitimate threat. And so it's not the worst thing if you match up with them. And mostly, I think I'm selfishly wanting the matchup against the Heat because you always have to start thinking about weather locations. And
so you're just worried about going to the 3 or 5.
If we happen to be back on the road for the playoffs and stuff like that, I would think about, it'd be nice to go to places like Chicago and Miami. And the Amina tour.
Right, exactly, the Amina tour.
So, all right, well, I'm fascinated to see what happens.
Oh, yeah. I'm definitely interested to see how everything goes. But just like you said, I don't know. If they see the Miami Heat, even though Jayson Tatum will probably will be the best player on the floor, I think that series is going to be very tough facing the Miami Heat, just because that team never quits. And I don't know, of course, the Celtics, they're clicking on all cylinders right now. But the Miami Heat and the way that they're coached by Eric Spoelstra, that's going to be a scary series.
Well, we got a couple more weeks here, almost 3 full weeks of trying to figure out how this is going to play out. Amina, congratulations on the 1-year anniversary here in Boston. I hope the next year is filled with a lot more of what we've seen the last 3 months than necessarily the previous 9, which were tough. All right, I need everybody to go subscribe, check us out on the YouTube page. Check out Celtics Post Up if you're seeing this before. There's reruns and stuff like that. Set it on your DVR if you haven't already. We'll catch you next time on the Celtics Talk Podcast.